Hello, Simone. I'm excited to be talking to you today. This is a crazy thing that's happening, but we're going to be going over 3 articles, but 2 of the articles just to give you some spice to start this up. Whistleblower, there's a trans cult inside the NSA.
No.
And then the other one that we'll be going over is the NSA's secret sex chats. Intelligence officials maintained a chat room to discuss polyamory and transgender surgeries, and also it appears to sext each other. Internal documents reveal.
At least they're having fun. That's
what they're doing on our dime is convincing people to transition and sexting with coworkers.
The NSA. I mean, they manage. They're the ones that have the giant data center that slurps up all of our private communications, right?
They monitor all of the world's communications. This is what Snowden was, fighting against.
Yeah.
This organization is apparently intensely infected with the urban monocultural virus. They are potentially using it to enforce their values on everyday Americans. And here I just need to say, Elon, we need you here, buddy. I was reminded recently of this scene.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of America!
Shut up! I know shit's bad right now, with all that starving bullshit. But I got a solution. Now, I understand everyone's shit's emotional right now, but listen up. I got a 3-point plan to fix everything. Break it down. Number 1, we got this guy,
Elon.
Number 2, he's got a higher IQ than any man alive.
I wanted to find somebody smarter than him. I searched all over. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't.
You really tried hard.
I couldn't find anyone smarter, right? So we had it for the country.
But this is the thing.
We settled on this.
And number 3, he's gonna fix everything. I give you my word as president. He's gonna fix the dust on the street. I give you my word. He's gonna fix the economy. He's so smart. He's gonna do it all in 1 week.
No.
Is this not what Trump is? I found the smartest guy in the world, and he's going to solve inflation. And he's going to
Trump. Literally, there are lines of Trump being like, "He's the smartest guy I could find. I looked for smarter people. I couldn't find them." Like, he literally.
It's literally Camacho.
Yeah.
That. Like, and I love when people are like, "What? Camacho has empathy. Trump has empathy. Like, you just don't see it because you're brainwashed nutter butters." But anyway. Okay, let's start with this chat here because this gets crazy.
Okay.
The first article is going to describe the situation, and I'm just taking the excerpts from it that I thought were most interesting. And then the second article is going to be parts of an interview with the whistleblower, or one of the whistleblowers, because there's been 2.
Ooh.
We have cultivated sources within the National Security Agency, that's the NSA, 1 current employee and 1 former employee who have provided chat logs from the NSA's Interlink messaging program. According to an NSA press official, all NSA employees sign agreements stating that publishing non-mission related material on Interlink is a usage violation and will result in disciplinary action. Nonetheless, these logs dating back 2 years are lurid, featuring wide-ranging discussions of sex, kink, polyamory, and castration. One popular chat topic was male to female transgender surgery, which involves surgically removing the penis and turning it into an artificial vagina. Quote, "Mine is everything," said one male who claimed to have had gender reconstruction surgery. "I found that I like being penetrated. Never before liked it. GRS." He goes on to say, another intelligence official boasted that genital surgery allowed him to, quote, "to wear leggings or bikinis without having to wear a gaff under it," end quote. So that's
Convenient to not have to tuck. Yes.
And again, they're misgendering in the article here. It was in City Journals, like a mainstream publication, but I guess it's the whistleblowers that misgender. I try not to misgender because it's their weird religion and they believe it.
Excuse me, are y'all with the cult?
We're not a cult. We're an organization that promotes love.
Yeah, this is it.
And so, like, why not, just show respect? It doesn't hurt me. But I can understand if for religious reasons you have to say what you think you are looking at and dealing with, why you might have some trouble doing that.
It's trying to be nice to someone,
Yeah.
and you can't always succeed at that. But if you have the bandwidth, why not?
The Klugda is the holy guide to living pure. This will help explain. First,
her name's Lorraine too?
we're all Lorraine, and you will be Todd, a name chosen especially for you.
Oh, you're
An oppressed minority?
you're a cult.
Yeah, I mean, I think Scientologists are wackadoos, but like I try to be like, yeah, you know, if they had something that they wanted to,
Yeah,
yeah,
be
Thetans,
nice
you know,
if you can.
yeah. These employees discussed hair removal, estrogen injections, and the experience of sexual pleasure post-castration. Quote, getting my butthole zapped by a laser was shocking, said one transgender identifying Intel employee who spent thousands on hair removal. Look, I just enjoy helping other people experience boobs, end quote, said another about estrogen treatments.
Oh,
So one of the weirdest things, no, he's saying he's hitting on people. You understand that,
he's
right?
doing his part. Well, he's just sharing. He's adding more tits to the world.
And then quote, one of the weirdest things that gives me euphoria is when I pee, I don't have to push anything down to make sure it aims right. A Defense Intelligence Agency employee added, according to our sources, the sex chats were legitimized as part of the NSA's commitment to, quote, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Activists within the agency used LGBTQ plus employee groups to turn kinks and pathologies into official work duties. According to the current NSA employee, these groups, quote, spent all day recruiting activists and holding meetings with titles such as privilege, ally awareness, pride, and transgender community inclusion.
So this is where I have to draw the line.
With
You know,
the
if you
full
talk
support.
in your own time about what you want to talk about,
Yeah.
fine. But if you are literally spending your government paid work hours doing this at the expense of your actual work task, what is happening?
And the NSA leadership declared of this sort of DEI, not only is it mission critical, it's mission imperative. And so, by the way, the last article that we're going to go over, which I don't know if you've read yet, is an article about these people from their own perspective and them being afraid that these agencies are being cleaned up.
The Mother Jones article, right?
Yeah, Trump has found some very interesting ways to clean up the spread of this cult. And note, I call this a cult because this is not, you know, when you're talking about like the modern trans movement, this is not like the gay movement. Gay people have existed throughout human history. They exist in pretty much every culture on earth. Trans people are, i.e., being obsessed with which gender you are seen as, and recreational gender transition, i.e., gender transition for your own benefit, is completely unique to our culture. It doesn't seem to have existed at any other point in human history. The instances that they will point to of it, like two spirits or the thing in India, the two spirits, they're just talking about twins. The thing in Thailand and the thing in, I think, New Zealand where this is done, clearly it's gay males who have a preference for the types of jobs that
I
women
think there are
do.
also just people who are more gender fluid, and people just didn't really
Yeah,
care.
and
Like
gender
if someone
fluidity-
just dressed a little differently or just didn't really seem that feminine or masculine, for the most part,
Right.
nobody cared. And they
Men
just did their
wearing
thing.
dresses and stuff like that has existed. Cross-dressing has existed. We see this deep into like Roman history and stuff like that. But when people did it, they never had an obsession with being seen as that particular gender expression. That is completely unique and appears to be the thing that is correlated with an increased desire to unalive themselves, with a 40 to 50% attempted unaliving rate within this community that apparently is a completely cultural phenomenon. And when you ask people in the community, why are you doing it? It's like, well, because I'm not seen as my, you know, this they say, if I can't be seen this way, I'm going to unalign myself. That's like super unique to our culture. The idea of like, oh, would you rather have a trans child or a dead child? Like that is not the way transness worked, i.e. gender fluidity has ever worked in human history.
Yeah.
That's why we see it as toxic and something that is dangerous.
Well, I think if anything, some kind of forced quasi-medical transition has only ever been, until very recently, a form of punishment. For example, chemical castration imposed upon
No, there's
gay
two
men in the history. And also like some cultures being like, oh, you're gay? Well, then we're going to force you to become a woman because then you're correct.
there's a few counterexamples.
Huh?
We're young boys who, if you were a particularly good singer, to preserve your voice, they would
Oh,
castrate you.
yeah, maybe.
And
Or if your family was really poor and that was the one way to make money. I don't think they can. Like
the
that.
other example is groups in India, which trans people claim are a form of trans, when what it is boys who grow up in poverty who get castrated so that they can make more money in sex work pretending to be women.
Yeah. But that's still not great. It was never done. It was never like a little boy or a little girl would hope for the privilege of some equivalent of forced sex change.
Yeah, there might be some counterexamples to this, but I would agree with you that, like, if you're contrasting this to something like the gay phenomenon, like same-sex attraction, you are not going to see a desire, like, medically transition, which has existed for a long time. I mean, castration to look more like a woman has existed for a long time. This being a popular phenomenon that people sought out is nowhere like, if you're using gayness as like the counter to this, it's basically non-existent cross-culturally or historically. It's a completely local phenomenon. Note here, don't take my word for this. If you do not believe me on this particular issue, the thing that's going to convince you most is to just look up different cultural groups that trans people claim to be examples of transness within other cultures or history. Then look up descriptions of them, and you will find that they always fall into one of three categories. It's either gender nonconforming twink gays who like doing women-like professions like wedding planning and stuff like that, and the culture has a very rigid concept of gender, so it conceptualizes them as women. It's not that they're like desperate to be seen as women or anything like that. Male cross-dressers who, you know, you see some like emperors from Roman time where this is clearly like a sex thing for them, or sex workers being forced to pretend to be women or to look more like women to get more sex work. No, now it exists in other cultures because it's been exported, but I mean, modern local phenomenon. In this case, diversity was not a byword for racialism, but rather a euphemism for sex talk. Last January, chat room members discussed their practice of polyamory or ethical non-monogamy. Quote, a polycule is a polyamorous group, one employee explained. Quote, A as in my girlfriend and BG and her partners. Then B and C are dating, but not C and D, nor E, F, and G with any of the others, though there are several MWBs, metas with benefits, connections. Another employee claimed to be part of a 9-member polycule, adding that, quote, some of our friends are particularly polymers with all of the connected compounds. As a joke about polymers, but yeah. So this is about their big sex groups, and I actually don't find this is it's
not necessarily sex groups. I would argue that polyamory is way more about the like new relationship energy or social connection than it is ultimately about sex. Because otherwise, you just have like more free sex groups or swingers or something like that. Polyamory is way more. But my problem with this again is to be polyamorous, especially to have that person with 9 active partners is basically a full-time job. Yeah, most of the people we've met who have a lot of partners and actively court them,
they either don't have hobbies or their job is happening at work, which is what I expect. They're doing all their flirting at work and just not working. At other times, the conversation became explicit. The active source at the NSA claimed to have witnessed hundreds of sexually provocative discussions, which he added occurred mostly on taxpayer time. The former NSA source, who was familiar with these chats, recalled being, quote unquote, disgusted by a particularly shocking thread discussing weekend, quote unquote, gangbangs. The NSA sources.
Well, hey, on the weekends, that's good.
Yes, at least the gangbangs aren't happening at work. The NSA sources also raised questions of some staffers' mental fitness for the job. In one chat, an NSA employee insisted on using it pronouns in lieu of he or she pronouns. It
seems so dehumanizing. Like I would feel very uncomfortable using it as a pronoun just because it.
Yeah, it sounds like what the other side made up to make fun of these people.
Yeah, don't choose that one. Choose anything but that.
So the person said, its user here, while I understand we can make some people uncomfortable, keep in mind that the dehumanizing aspect either A, doesn't apply, or B, is a positive effect when we're requesting it. Oh, so they're explicitly discussing the dehumanizing aspect here. So listen to this. They're basically saying, I get off on being dehumanized. They're saying its user here, while I understand it can make some people uncomfortable, keep in mind the dehumanizing aspect either doesn't apply or it is a positive effect when we're requesting it. They are, and this is what we talk about with the trans community, where the gay community just wanted to be able to do their own thing. The trans community is trying to force you to do something. They are with like the it and stuff like that. They are trying to force you to participate in something that is generating a positive emotional response in them that they will swear isn't sexual in nature, but like being dehumanized. I'm sorry, nobody gets off on being dehumanized for anything other than a sexual reason. They are trying to force everyone they interact with at work to engage in their dehumanization fetish.
That's not, that's again, this is a forcing other people to consent to something that they don't consent to. I'm not down with that.
A commenter who disagreed with this was quickly dismissed by employees of NSA and CIA, who claimed that refusing to use its pronouns amounted to erasing a transgender identity. This was NSA and CIA. Oh, we've got to cut deep. Elon needs to go full Twitter on these organizations. He says, these are folks with top secret clearances believe they are an it. That is shocking. So now to the actual interview they did with the whistleblower after the story went out and then did the rounds. So the whistleblower says, about 10 years ago, they started doing the employees resource groups, African Americans, veterans, pride. It was just a meeting here and there, almost like a potluck culture, food, a speech. Then it started to get more and more. Instead of just one day a month, it was 1 week a month or a whole month. You could get hired as a mathematician, a staff officer, or a system engineer, but you would spend your time going to these events and having meetings all day about it. They got positions and helped craft policy and started pushing the idea if you wanted to be promoted, you had to participate in these events. And then everything became pride. You would go to training and it would be about privilege and how to be a better ally. A lady would give classes on how to talk gender neutral to people. You had an analyst that didn't want to do the reporting they were supposed to be doing because they were going to have to report on somebody's quote unquote dead name.
No.
This crisis of conscience about reporting the adversary's actual name because they thought it was their quote unquote dead name and they didn't want to disrespect the person. It was like a cult that was hell-bent on pushing gender ideology.
This is not good. No. At the NSA, you need...
The whole organization had become, completely bloated with this self-replicating mimetic set, which was eating more and more department resources and reorienting the department's role around spreading and protecting the cult, which is really what you have to call it, because this is anti-science. Like, this is not what the science supports anymore. So, like, what is this, right? Like, it is scary that our CIA and NSA are being used for this. And who knows if we get on a watch list or something now. I hope that...
As if we weren't already. I don't know.
Elon, Trump, and JD. All right, so then Chris Rufo, the guy who did this break, fantastic, right? Anyway, he says, it seems like a clique of very activist male to female transgender agents. Tell me about this community. And then the guy says, there is a very small number of them, but they wield an enormous amount of power. And outside of the sick stuff, you also see prevalent Marxist philosophy going on with these people in their chat rooms. They hate capitalism. They hate Christians. They're always espousing socialist or Marxist beliefs. I know several people at the agency who brought up that, like, quote, hey, we're here to fight for the USA and to go after the adversaries, and they got hammered. They would just start coming out with transphobe or homophobe right away, calling you a racist, just saying we're here to fight for the USA. And that's why a lot of folks are still hesitant to say anything, because they still have people at these agencies who are in those key spots. It infected everything.
My God, these guys are like Mirror World Ron Swansons, where they just are there to slow down the government.
No, I promise they want to use the government to hurt people. That's their goal, to hurt Christians, everyday Americans. That's why they want the power. That's why they want was in these organizations.
Yeah, because that's my big thing is, why are you working for the NSA if you are a Marxist trans person who doesn't believe that the NSA
because
is
they want to utilize the organization to police other people. Remember the episode we did where we found out that people who use the word red pill or
were on a
terrorist
they were put on. Yes. Oh, I forgot.
MGTOW got you on a terrorist watch list.
Yeah, I guess this is all part of sort of the same collective movement of mission creep and organizational capture, whereby, really powerful organizations are now used not to protect the interests of American citizens, but to push an ideological agenda that actually runs counter to the interests of most American citizens.
Exactly. And then what is the outcome, Rufo is asking? In your view, does such a focus on DEI and trans ideology degrade the actual intelligence activities of the agency? It does, because you have people more focused on this ideology, and the folks who aren't into this don't put the effort into their work. I don't care if you're political, left or right. You can't have an unbiased mind if you're writing a report and you're constantly focused on, quote, how does this apply to gender ideology, end quote, because when you do that, it's going to get people killed in the field. So these people are likely getting people killed. Because they're not even they're not doing their jobs well. But I think that this guy is wrong and he doesn't understand. The organization has been transformed from an organization that's about protecting American rights, because this is what we saw with Reddit. Remember, we pointed out in the one episode that Reddit's just completely astroturf these days. The number one town on Reddit right now is a military base that is used predominantly for misinformation and psyops. The Reddit is a psyop operation run by the military. And so then the question is, of CIA, NSA, why is it so lefty? This is why. Because these organizations have been taken over. And then the person says, Rufo says, you're talking about trans ideology, cult-like behavior, and Marxist politics. That to me screams unstable. It screams counterintelligence risk. How do you see it? And then the whistleblower says, all of the above. The folks like that were quite unstable. I see it as a counterintelligence risk, but it's being normalized and it's being praised. There was a time in the last year when people were writing blog entries trying to one-up each other. Quote, I have a non-binary child, end quote, and quote, oh, well, I have 2 trans children, end quote. Anyone
take that.
Immediately punched. That's statistically impossible. That just means that you are up your children's life, especially when you know the unaliving rate within that community. The fact that you could push people towards that for your own status is disgusting in the extreme. It became a social thing, trying to one-up each other with how weird they are, and they'd come up with terms because they have to be unique. They want you to treat them normally, and at the same time, you better recognize that they are unique and different from you. So there's no winning. It's a lose-lose scenario.
Basically.
The director of national intelligence released a memo that it would require all intelligence agents to identify the trans fetishist and terminate their employment and revoke their security clearances. How do you expect that to play out? The whistleblower. I wish I could say it playing out well with the following the orders and doing it, but after the last years, I just don't know. They should be able to identify them easily enough because they have all the logs. If they can't, then they're just stonewalling. I hope this is the start of getting intelligence agencies back to what they should be doing, which is focused on intel and supporting the warfighter. Just come in and do your job. Leave that shit at the door. So they have started to go against this. Now, what's really cool is Mother Jones, they posted a piece on this, and we can already see through their own reporting how the left is trying to ignore these orders, hide, quote unquote, protect the cultists within their organization. So let's go into this, or do you have any thoughts before we do?
I want to go into this.
So the article that Mother Jones, I'll just give it we're just going to be a section.
Yeah, hold on.
Race for a McCarthyist purge. And then the line that they use as a headline. And this is how Trump approached this. And I think it's so smart. They're not asking people, are you gay? Are you a lesbian? They're asking who is participating in the DEI, i.e. who is going.
Yeah, well, and because keep in mind, we, for example, the company that we acquired as part of our private equity effort, quite well represented LGBTQ.
Yeah,
but no one brings it to work. We don't talk about our personal lives. We do not bring any of that to the workplace. If there's drama at home, it stays there. And that's great. And that's and so the focus is 100% on the purpose of the business. It's not people's identity. It's bringing it to the office and wasting taxpayer dollars.
From the position recently, but I think the only straight guy in the company at a few points. And this is like not a problem at all. Like, and I think that the important thing is the right really supports gay people, right? You see this throughout, like the tech right is like led by like Peter Thiel and like Elon and like, you've got people out there flipping the election for Trump. Like gay people are throughout the leadership of the right now, but they are not the type of gay people who would have been wasting their time in DEI meetings.
Yeah, they're people who work. Yeah, that's
so I actually think that this is great because who is wasting time at this DEI BS is a perfect predictor of who is just a gay person and who is using this to gain institutional power.
Also, so many DEI people aren't LGBTQIA anything or even minorities, are just Karens. So
yeah, or they're one of those people who like identifies as gay because they identify as like trans or like non-binary,
or they have a thing for lording authority over other people and using social consensus to exert power.
Is that there's a lot of people today who just identify as gay because like, you're a partner identify, like Fundy Friday is a great example of this. Like if you started identifying as trans and I'm now like, well, I'm gay because I'm sleeping with a non-binary person, which you or I could do. Like both of us are technically trans by leftist ideology
because we're non-binary, because we wouldn't give a shit if we woke up the other gender,
which makes us agender. Agender is a form of genderqueer. Genderqueer is a form of trans. So both you and I are trans. Most of us could say that we're in a gay or at least queer relationship. Yet, and you're also mostly asexual. So yet also we don't do that, right? Like because it's weird, right? And I wouldn't go to meetings about that, and I don't need to make that my identity. So I think this is the perfect way of splitting the real gay people who just want to live their lives and the people who want to force these ideologies on other people. I mean, and you're totally right. Most of them are probably not even what we'd historically call same-sex attracted people. They're sex pests is what they are.
No, my argument beyond that though is that many people who are involved in DEI are literally white, often female, monogamous, straight people. They don't even hold the identity. They can still be involved. So.
Well, no, I actually disagree. I think you'd be surprised by how many of them would call themselves trans or genderqueer or non-binary or bi.
Maybe.
Or look, if you're a white, classically like sexualized woman, there's a lot of words you can choose for yourself, whether it's
demisexual or something,
or because I also like some, like, okay, for example, they happen to sometimes find themselves attracted to trans women who haven't made a point of transitioning, i.e. they look exactly like NATO males. So they call themselves gay. Yeah, there's always a way to be gay these days, especially if you're a white woman. And they need this because they can't be at the top of the hierarchy, which they are within these workplace environments. But anyway.
Okay.
But since returning to power, Trump and his allies have cast these same groups as subversive and even illegal, an example of radical and discriminatory program. So they see this as insane. They use air quotes for radical and discriminatory. But
McCarthyism has returned.
Promoting diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. Keep in mind our organization that we started, DEIremediation.com. If you need this within your company or you think that your company can benefit to it, be sure to air it with the higher ups. We come in, we help clear this stuff up for you, and we can save you so much money, help you so much with aligning your marketing team with your customer base. If you're Harley Davidson, your marketing team should be like middle-aged men, not a room of Karens, okay? But anyway, the Office of Personnel Management, essentially the executive branch's HR department, issued a memorandum telling agencies to prohibit employee research groups that promote unlawful DEIA initiatives or employee retention agendas based on protected characteristics. Okay. So they're literally saying don't be racist, sexist, because the employee retention agenda based on protected characteristics, that's literally racial discrimination. Or
that sounds kind of wrong. a little.
They give away the bag here. You know, they're like,
no,
anyway.
Mother Jones is writing this with a straight face, talking about how horrifying it is. And that's what's wild about this article.
The OPM memo is just one of many Trump actions generating fear of a new quote unquote lavender scare, a purge that could roll back decades of LGBTQ gains and send those who remain in the government back into the closet. Again, you yourself said they're not looking for gay and lesbians. They're looking for people who participate in these groups.
Yeah, but I also feel like everyone's home life should be in the closet when they go to work.
Exactly. While Trump has appointed a couple of token gay officials, Treasury Secretary Scott Bassett and Special Missions Officer Rick Janelle. Look, we didn't even mention those. We were mentioning like top people in the right who are gay. Like there's right, like
yeah, but you mentioned Elon Musk. He's not gay.
No, he's not gay, but like he's obviously very pro-gay. Like Elon Musk is not gonna like seriously. You guys think Elon Musk is like a one iota homophobic?
No, but he went anti-trans after his daughter like denounced him. So
yeah, because like sane people are anti-trans these days.
Yeah,
like,
no. Because he saw how the system was used to radicalize.
I even know trans people who are anti-trans these days.
No, this is true.
I'd say that like I know a lot of like base trans, not a lot, but like at least like a few, like 4 or some like base trans people who are like, yeah, the whole trans thing is completely harmful these days and was a mistake. But anyway, he simultaneously declared war on transgender people, issuing edicts against so-called gender ideology and an onslaught of executive orders attempting to impose widespread discrimination against trans people in schools, hospitals, sports, homeless shelters, and prisons. In the U.S. Department of Agriculture, multiple people have been asked to report the names of LGBTQ employee resource group leaders. Again,
they're asking for the leaders. Yeah, they're not asking for
group
gay
leaders
people or trans people.
Yeah. High-ranking officials, according to interviews with workers and documented, reviewed by Mother Jones. In the Interior Department, too, Michael says that an official has informed him that they'll be asked to produce names of at least some participants in employee resource groups. Great! That's exactly who we need to get rid of. Anyone involved in this group.
Yeah.
I never thought my involvement in an after-work group would land me here. Well, you're talking about it at work, we know from the other sources. So good try to weasel that out there. A board member of the USDA Queer Employee Resource Group says, they're not coming out and saying, we want to fire the queers, Michael says. They're not asking people, are you gay? Are you a lesbian? They're asking, who is participating in DEI, but in the end, it's going to have the same effect. No, it's
really not. It's really not.
The gay people who you guys hate, who you see as like the weird Republican gays, they're going to be fine. And I'm not even saying that they're Republican gays. They're just the gays who refused to go along with your BS.
Or the gays who prefer to work at work, maybe?
Yeah. Persecution, the DOD employee says. The government no longer recognizes my medical condition or acknowledges my existence as a transgender woman. What are these additional medical conditions here? You know, for everything was if it's, my medical conditions. That's like the key of who I am. When the new administration terminated federal DEI positions and programs on Inauguration Day, employees on DEI teams or who had previously held those jobs were swiftly placed on administrative leave and their access cut off to federal computers and systems. Some of those workers have since received notices that they have been officially fired. They got disappeared, says a non-binary USDA worker, I'll call Ryan, who regularly worked within the agency's DEI team as part of his job responsibilities. Why was that part of his job responsibilities? You said this was an after-work thing. I can't look up their name in the system. All the chats with them have been deleted, he says. Okay, probably for the best. Late last week, a federal judge in Maryland issued a preliminary injunction blocking the parts of Trump's anti-DEI orders that threatened to cut off, quote-unquote, equity-related federal grants and funding for contractors. Yet the federal employees remain vulnerable. And it has become clear that the Trump administration's DEI purge is far from over. Documents uncovered by Washington Post show the DOJ plans to identify and fire workers who do not hold DEI-related jobs, but, quote, but could be, quote, tied to diversity initiatives through unsuspected other means, end quote. Way to go, DOJ.
Yeah, that's what we're going for.
As the Post put it, dozens of employees in the education department have already been put on administrative leave for attending DEI trainings during the first Trump administration, even though participation had back then been encouraged. Encouraged by who? Not by Trump. not by the administrative officials, by you people who are trying to. When the first Trump administration was basically an administration where the deep state led a coup against the will of the voters. And these meetings were where you organize the local parts of that deep state coup.
100%.
Now we know who was involved in that.
And they tolerated it to begin with. And they thought it was fine. Like, it's not like they even came in against it. They are against it for very good reasons, because they understand that this was the apparatus used to undermine their every action.
Why were people encouraged to go to these groups is the question you need to ask yourself. They weren't encouraged because all of a sudden, like, what they were encouraged that they could organize the fight against Trump. And we know the fight against Trump happened because you can look at what happened in regards to Trump's agenda in the first term and what has happened under the reign of the triumvirate, which has been astronomical. Someone like me, it's somebody saying, I'm just waiting for them to find me, says a queer civil engineer who was previously assigned to work part-time on a program to mitigate anti-LGBT discrimination. So he was working on this for his job, working on this program for his job with taxpayer money.
Wow.
It's only a matter of time. Those of us like me who have done trainings are out. We're afraid. It makes it incredibly hard to concentrate and focus at work. Okay, so they're not working anymore. Get out of work then. Come on. This is how other people have felt at work while you guys held the reins. And as the person said, it was made clear that you couldn't easily get promoted if you didn't go to these. Like, that's horrifying. Even those who never worked on DEI or participated in employee resource groups worry about the ways they could be targeted. For example, new rules like January 29th OPM directive requiring that quote unquote intimate spaces be designated by biological sex and not gender identity. Why do you need to flash women? Like what's you so gross. And we know this is about flashing women. The reason we know this is about flashing women is Leah Thomas. This was the swimmer who everyone was like, this is the face of the trans movement. And yet long before she had undergone the gender transition surgery, she had a male willy. She looked like a male. She was changing in front of the other women in the locker room. The other women were like, I don't want to see this. And the trans movement, the primary trans organizations, when everyone was like, surely this is not what you're fighting for, right? And they're like, no, this is exactly what we're fighting for. So you basically played your cards. This is about being allowed to flash people. You know, women specifically without, again, it's about violating consent. It's about violating their consent to refer to you the way they want to refer to you. It's about violating their consent within their private spaces. This is
power
about violating consent and power dynamics.
Yeah.
So the trans woman working for the Department of Defense, for instance, says she is determined to continue using the women's restroom. Oh, so we're just going to ignore all the rules. After going through the painstaking process of medical transition, including diagnosis, therapy, testing, and surgery. I have been dehumanized so much, she says. I'm not going to stop using women's facilities. So, okay, then like you should be fired, right? Including women in your sexuality, like innocent bystanders who don't want to be included in this.
Yeah, if you're not willing to play by the rules of your employer, then the employer has every right to let you go.
Even admit that, well, it's not even an employer. Like, this never should have been allowed in the first place, right? You know, if you wanted to use like single stalls and stuff like that, fine. But if women are made uncomfortable by this, you don't get to violate their consent. Like, we used to understand this. And the idea that this wasn't being used by people who didn't look at all like women or had undergone medical transition, everyone knows it was, because again, Leah Thomas, early in the movement, you guys doubled down. Women should be forced to look at your penis if you don't consider it a penis or you think it's a female penis. And they made their hands. Isn't me pointing to some like extremists who the movement denounced?
No.
Okay. Even amid this terror campaign, support continues to exist for queer and trans federal workers, much of it quiet and behind the scenes. Several employees say their managers have privately expressed a desire to protect them. Co-workers have been sending sympathetic messages. So again, they're trying to protect them. We need to, as we're getting rid of these individuals, anyone who tries to protect them needs to be gotten rid of as well. And these are individuals who are forcing, again, if you're just trans, like whatever, you're going to follow the rules, whatever. If you are using these sorts of support groups to organize a counter state resistance, to just ignore orders that are coming down from above, That's a completely different thing. And if somebody's like, oh, but what about the women who like totally pass and are going to be made really uncomfortable by this? It's like, well, then maybe you should have done more in these support groups to fight against thing like the Leah Thomas thing, to fight against the people who made no effort to pass and were taking advantage of the same stuff. That was on you. That is what these groups should have been used to do. In the conservative movement, we have made an extended and very explicit effort, as you will see on things like this show, to shit on the people who go too far, who go into racism and anti-Semitism, and we very explicitly pull it and call it out. Even homophobia type stuff or anti-gay stuff, we call that out on the show all the time as well. We have dealt with our version of people who support stuff that nobody wants, that's not even popular within our own party. You refuse to do it within your side, and we pay a cost when we do this, just as you would pay a cost if you did it within your side, but you refuse to pay that cost. And that's why we'll still be here in 50 years, and you had, as a cultural movement, control of the world for literally the shortest time any dominant cultural movement has ever held a position of power. But it's also why we need to remember on the right to continue to take out the trash of our own extremists, i.e. the racists and anti-Semites and extreme homophobes. And by homophobes here, I don't mean somebody who's just like, I wouldn't want my kids to be gay. I'm talking about like the crazy stuff, like banning gay marriage, banning what other people do in their own time, within their own places of worship. You know, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Like, we're not Sharia law here. The fact, like, we gave you a nice shiny toy as a society. I used to support trans women using women's restrooms, right? Like, I used to support this. We gave you this toy. I was like, okay, they're going to use this responsibly, aren't they? Oh, they didn't use it responsibly. Okay, well, now we need to take it back if we care about like the vast majority of people here.
Yeah.
And then they go, that was the case for Ryan, the non-binary employee of USDA. Though they'd been sure of their identity for over a decade, they didn't want to share it at work until 2 years ago when they moved into a new role with new coworkers and finally decided to add, quote, they, them to the bottom of their emails. That was my big rip off the Band-Aids, they said. It was scary, but it was exhilarating. Ooh, violating other people's consent is so exhilarating because you knew now they can't say anything. They, them, by the way, not like a normal, like they, them. That's a violation of consent regardless, right? Like you're forcing somebody to use a unique construct when relating to you, which signals you as different and special when contrasted with other people. Like I don't force people to call me Sir Malcolm, and then like, you know, that's like what that's equivalent to. Then at a recent staff meeting, employees were instructed to use a standard email signature that required them to remove their pronouns, not put standard pronouns, remove their pronouns. Ryan broke down crying in front of their team. I don't know how to stop being who I am anymore, they told Mother Jones. I am devastated and barely holding it together most of the time. What do you mean?
You still get to put your name in your signature. If your identity matters to you, just appreciate that people call you by your name. I don't get it.
Yeah,
your name's still there.
Your new name, like if you changed your name, people are still having to. You're still having to put that. Like you don't like that. You can't force all of this additional shit on people because, again, as we saw earlier in this, it's about violation of consent. When they're like, some people like it when they're dehumanized, but Ryan adds, I'm not quitting. I'm going to make them fire me if they want me to go away. So we know now the job's not done. We need to keep going through these organizations.
They will.
And removing this counter state force, this religion, because it is a religion. Like their beliefs are not based on science. They're based on an alternate ideology. And they think that the job of these organizations is to spread their ideology. And they use these cancerous tumors like DEI departments. I would actually go further. And I think that, and they've admitted this isn't about being gay. They admit that Trump employs lots of gay people. Like I love it that even Mother Jones lists this as, well, it's not about being gay. It's about being like aggressive. It's not even about being trans. It's about being aggressive in the way that you are violating the consent of others and the way that you are spreading your particular ideology without caring for, say, Christians, for example, who should have just as much right to have their religion within these organizations as you. And yet you, of course, wouldn't believe that, right? And I think this is where a lot of the new right comes from. Like people need to ask themselves more, why are Trump's most effective lieutenants all former leftist, anti-Trump people? Whether it's Elon or JD Vance or RFK, or even people like us, right? Like, why did all of these people become the sword of the right and are now unabashedly seen as far right? It was because we were the people who went out there and been like, hey, this LGBTQ stuff, yeah, let's give it the benefit of the doubt. Let's give them these privileges. Let's see what they do with it. And it was like, oh, they did not handle this. And so now we're like, yeah, if we're going to protect people, if we're going to protect women, if we're going to protect our organizations, we need to stop this stuff from spreading. If we're going to protect our tax dollars from being wasted on you guys having like sexy conversations on like intercom chats, we need to get out there and fight against this. This is not people who wanted you to not have any of these rights. This is all downstream of your own community members alienating people who wanted you guys to have the chance to live this life, to see if you could do this responsibly.
Yeah. And ultimately, that freedom was utilized to revoke consent from people who wanted to just live their lives. And that's where things went too far. And it is disturbing to me, though. Like we talk in the Pragmatist Guide to Governance how this dynamic takes place. You talk in the Pragmatist Guide to Crafting Religion about how the urban monoculture and more broadly woke culture, or more specifically woke culture, spreads and then sort of parasitizes the very values that it pretends to espouse. Yeah. But actually hearing about it play out in a place like the NSA or
in the CIA,
yeah, it's very disturbing. Like I just want to like I want to believe that, oh yeah, this dynamic takes place and some organizations really have major DEI takeover problems and they've become very unproductive. You know, the federal government's just so tight-laced that this is under control. And no, like the more that gets revealed, the more terrible it is. And I don't know. I shouldn't be surprised, but I am.
I feel the same way. Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah. Again, I think we've come to this place where, and this is coming in waves again and again and again. People thought the government was working. They thought society functioned. They thought that if someone broke a law,
and we saw what USA was doing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And yeah, they thought that broadly things were working. And now we're realizing when people shoplift, they don't get arrested. When people are found being in the country illegally, they don't get arrested. When, you know, people don't do their jobs in the federal government, they don't get fired.
And we need to crack down and start applying rules to people again. The final thought I'd have here, which I think was really smart when Trump did the first rollout of the DEI stuff, is he built a list of all of the contractors who were participating in this, so they couldn't just change the name of their something like that. We had the names and the information of everyone who had been involved in this, and I think that needs to be done again. That's the only way to prevent them from just coming back and trying to re-inject this with different names. And again, people can be like, oh, you're hunting the whatever. No, we're hunting the Marxists in our government, like actual Marxists who are like, yeah, I'm a Marxist in the United States government who hates the United States. That you would be slammed for saying, hey, isn't our job to defend the United States? That shows that your goals are antithetical to what we are paying you to do.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's probably good that you can go work at another company. Go work at a company focused on your value system. You don't need to be in the federal government.
Well, the thing is, though, the private sector doesn't want them. The private sector is trying to shed employees like crazy, unless you're talking about like Tyson chicken processing plants. They're hiring migrants. So.
We gotta help the private sector too. Oh, I mean, individuals who are going to go to their job and not do their job and just focus on spreading their ideology. That's an effing problem for any company. These, you know.
Yeah, it is.
And somebody who has a history of doing that does need additional scrutiny.
Well, I think that the reason why maybe this is worse in the federal government is that these agencies haven't had to fund themselves with cash flow. So, whereas, you know, these game companies that went woke are starting to run themselves into the ground financially. You know, then they only have a certain amount of time where they can be this irresponsible. The federal government, horrifyingly, has not worked with these constraints.
This is a great way to put it. As woke and terrible as Ubisoft is, was like Assassin's Creed Shadows. That's the NSA and the CIA right now.
Well, no, it's better because it's a very prominent financial failure. They're now feeling the pain. They're going to
So
have
the point I'm making is they are as infected. The stuff that they are putting out, you just don't see the stuff that they're putting out because it's clandestine. The stuff that they're putting out is the woke culture that we've been living in for the past 4 years. This has been manipulated by these organizations, as we saw on the episode about the astroturfing of Reddit.
Yeah.
Anyway, love you to death, Simone.
I love you too. I think that's probably going to be it for today because she's getting wiggly. I also watched a YouTuber go over like famous Soviet cartoons.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because they do very different, they're promoting very different values, many of which I like because it's a big focus on work and productivity. But then there was this one scene of a movie where characters stole parts of a car, just someone's car, to like build a playground, and a policeman comes and is like, "What have you done to this car?" And they're like, "Well, we built a playground," and they point to it, and he's like, "All right, good work. I'll take care of the car." And like, just like there's no respect for, I guess, commercial property or private property in this case, or maybe the government will just take care of it, but they appreciate the productivity and work. And I feel so conflicted about that. I'm like, oh, but property rights, but also work and resourcefulness.
So bizarre as well that my remote is still missing. I've ordered new remotes. Hopefully they work with the monitor.
You just need to look at the kids' room. It's been all over the kids' room. I've been like, what is this remote for? This is so strange.
Well, where is it then? You can find. I went to the room. I didn't see it. I checked Toaster's bed.
Well, I've noticed a lot of things out of place in the kitchen, so they got into that last night. So I need to. It's probably in the fridge. I will check.
Yeah, how do we keep them from doing that?
I really need to figure out this.
Going downstairs today and finding Toasty with what he was playing with. He found a way to get into wherever the
Clearly, we need to up our childproofing. We childproofed for like mid children, and we have elite children. So
we have elite children childproofing.
They figured out how to like get into locked containers and extremely high shelves. And now,
well, you need to talk to John about how to better lock the door going downstairs
to the kitchen. Yeah, because they should not have access to.
Maybe even
the
put
knives
like a padlock on it.
That's what I was thinking, was a padlock with a combination that only we know.
Yeah, that's the only answer. All right.